hello Bryan.
Hello.
You're just going to release your third studio album with the Aristocrats, Caballeros, this month on June 23. So the title is in Spanish, and this album seems to be in a very western or country style. Some songs even remind the Shadows in a sense. Is it true? And why did you do this artistic choice?
Well, it's not totally true. There are a couple songs on the record that have a Western or Texas flavor. Yeah. Two of my songs and one of Guthrie's songs. Guthrie wrote a song called The Kentucky Meat Shower, which is the first song that we released as a free single on YouTube, which is very kind of fast country American style.
Yeah.
And then I wrote a song called Smuggler's Corridor, which is the kind of the Shadows thing that you were talking about, almost like a spaghetti western feel. And then there's Texas Crazy Pants, which is kind of like a Stevie Ray Vaughan kind of blues meets the Dixie Dregs meets like almost like punk hillbilly music, like typical kind of aristocratic mixture of genres. But those are the kind of hyper American kind of styles. And the rest of the record has a bunch of completely different things that really aren't like this. Tres Caballeros we were just trying to come up with something that indicated that it was the third record. And we tried on a lot of different titles. Marco had a song on the record called ZZ Top, just because he thought it would be fun to have a song like that, and a song sounded like that. And I thought we should call the record Tres Hombres. And I thought, well, wait a minute, that ZZ Top already has a record called Tres Hombres. And so then we started messing around with the song titles, and we came up with Tres Caballeros because three gentlemen is what that means.
Would you describe the evolution of the whole band of the Aristocrats through the albums?
Well, the first album, we didn't really know each other that well musically at all. We just got together in the studio just to see what would happen. And the first record was very fast, and we didn't really have any idea how it was going to turn out. The second record we did was after some touring. So that made more sense, and we were more comfortable with each other as a band, but it was still a raw, aggressive, in-your-face record. Then we did a lot of touring. Then for the third record, we decided that we would go into a nicer studio and make a record that has more overdubs, texture, more expansive arrangements, to try and bring the Aristocrats into a new direction, but while still being ourselves. So we really explored what was possible in a studio environment for the band. And I think that's the big difference for this record.
And what the Aristocrats bring you as a bass player?
It's a very exciting and challenging band. A bass player, and with Marco Miniman on drums and Guthrie Govan on guitar. It's very, very exciting, very fulfilling, very challenging. And it's really kind of a dream gig where I can be me, and I don't have to be like super chops, all these crazy things, bass player, you know. I just have to play bass in a very exciting, kinetic environment and hold together the guitar and the drums like a fulcrum in the middle, because Guthrie and Marco are so technically advanced and capable of anything at any time. My role is to provide the foundation, and it's very exciting to provide a foundation for two musicians so incredibly talented as Guthrie and Marco.
So you will be a part of the J4 Experience Camp from June 28 to July 2 in Cambria, California. This year, the J4 is starring Joe Satriani, Guthrie Govan, Tosin Abazi and Mike Kennelly, and also the whole Aristocrats band will be there with you and Marco. What will be exactly your role in this camp, and what do you expect from those 4 days?
Well, I love educational environments. I like being able to provide whatever it is that I am able that I know and learn over the years to other people who are obviously very interested in learning from professionals. So that's what's exciting for me, even though most of the people in the camp will be guitarists. You know, I still want to be able to provide something for them. There will be a couple of bass players there, you know, and we'll have our own little private session. And I talk bass with them. But really, we understand that this is a guitar camp for the most part. And my role will be to explain to people how I support the guitar. And I can do that by talking, but I can also do it just by demonstrating, as I'll be playing with Joe Satriani for his concert, with the Aristocrats for their concert, and with Mike Kennelly for his concert. So I'm the bass player for all of these. Maybe I would be the bass player for Animals as Leaders, but they don't have a bass player, so. But I love Animals as Leaders. I'm a big fan. And Tosin is an incredible guitarist, completely unique. And I think anybody who goes to the G4 experience is going to have an amazing time with all these incredibly talented people there.
You've recorded in January in Skywalker Studios a new album with Joe Satriani, Shockwave Supernova, and it's going to be released in July 24. You've been touring past couple years with Joe for the Unstoppable Momentum tour, but that's the first time you ever made a record together. What have you brought in this album?
Well, I just brought me. I mean, you know, my job is always to support the music. If it's for the Aristocrats, it's a very different role. I'm constantly reacting to Marco and Guthrie and making sure that the foundation holds together while things are going crazy. With Joe, Marco and I, both our jobs is to hold the groove together and really be steady so that Joe can do his more melodic and in many ways more simple. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, like, you know, just less note density. So that he can fulfill his more simple kind of melodic message that he's trying to bring. And so Marco and I will obviously play less than we would play in an Aristocrats recording. But in the end of the day, I'm just trying to play the song. You know, if Joe writes a song like On Peregrine Wings, I know the groove, play the groove. Don't make too many fills on the record. You know, live we stretch out some more, but on the record, he really believes to keep it very solid, very straight, very steady. And so I hope that I brought that, what Joe Satriani's music needs from a bass player. And in the end of the day, I always show up as myself because that's all I could do. I can't try and be anybody else. It wouldn't work.
Okay. What were the easiest and the most difficult parts to record for Shockwave Supernova?
I don't remember. It was January.
It's back in January, but...
You know, there was no one bit in particular that was necessarily hard. It was just maintaining the focus throughout. Maintaining a consistent focus for each of the songs throughout. That was really the most difficult part. It's, you know, with Joe, it's just about providing consistency.
Can you tell me some fun facts about the time you spent in Skywalker Studios?
It's a big room. I don't really. I mean, it's a beautiful place, and you can walk around on the grounds, and it looks like, you know, the Wizard of Oz land outside. It's really beautiful, and it's a very, very nice environment, very conducive to creativity and to making music. It's a beautiful. I mean, I was honored to play at Skywalker Sound. There's really nowhere else in the world like it. So it was my privilege, and I don't have any really, inside stories or anything. We went there and we made a record, and we were treated very, very well, and everybody was wonderful to us. So that's all there is.
Okay. What did you listen from Joe before you started playing with him?
I don't know if I want to answer this question.
Okay.
Because, the truth is, I didn't have any of Joe's records.
Okay.
I knew, of course, Joe's big songs.
Yeah.
But I had not, I hadn't really gone into Joe's catalog. I had more of Steve Vai's records.
Yeah.
Because the more complicated arrangements was something that kind of drew my attention. And especially kind of when I was younger, it was 1989, 1990, I was at Berklee College of Music and I was 20 years old. So, I didn't appreciate as much what Joe was doing, which was more of a melodic thing, than Steve, which was much more kind of, the rhythm section in Steve's music was always more active. So I was ooh, that's interesting. I'll play along with that, Whereas I would hear something like Flying in a Blue Dream, like, okay, well, that's a really cool piece of music. But when I was 17 or 18 years old, it wasn't like, oh, I want to play that, But as I've grown older, I really appreciate the space and the openness in a lot of Joe's music, and how that is an opportunity to stretch out musically in a whole other way. So really, it's actually been special for me to kind of go back and play Joe's music as if it was new for me, because it is. Yeah. And just the fact that I didn't have any Joe's records is no disrespect to Joe. I'm actually a fairly poor music consumer, and my record collection is not nearly as big as many other musicians. That's a little confession.
Now, some questions about you. When was the starting point when you realized you wanted to be a professional bass player?
When my year before I went to Berklee College of Music, I was in high school, and I realized I was very bored in high school, and I didn't want to really do this anymore, and with regular school, and I just wanted to go to a place where I could just play music. And then when I got to Berklee, I realized that I had a lot to learn, because I thought I was good, and I was not. So I practiced and practiced and practiced. When I was at Berklee and I was among other people who were also musicians, I realized this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do.
Okay.
So I was 17 or 18, which is kind of late. But I was a lazy practicer when I was in high school.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then once I was at Berklee and I started to become more professional and better player, I saw that this could be my life, and then I became very excited to play music, all the time. And maybe I could even get paid too.
How would you define your personal style in music?
Well, I am always interested in being able to provide the basic foundation that a bass player should provide, even if the music is complicated. Should be provide the basic foundation of the harmonic content that a bass player is supposed to provide, and the basic foundation for the rhythmic content that a bass player is supposed to provide, even if the music becomes complex, and always with a good sound. It's the sound is the thing that I hope that people would remember if they hear me play. Not if I went or whatever. Anybody can do that. There's a million bass players there's a lot of bass players who are much more technically advanced than I am. I'm not trying to win that race, because I never will win that race. And it's not a race anyway. What I want to provide, hopefully, that other people will recognize is the sound that I make. My basic kind of bright sound, and I also have a darker sound that I use for certain songs, but always, hopefully, something that people would recognize as me. Because when I hear my favorite musicians, that's how I recognize them. It's the sound. When I hear Eddie Van Halen play guitar, I know it's him in 2 seconds. When I hear Jaco Pastorius playing bass, immediately I know it's him because I know what it sounds like.
Yeah.
It's not because he's playing an A-flat major scale. It's because he sounds the way that he sounds. That's what I hope to be able to provide.
And if you had the power to play with one musician, who would it be?
John Scofield. Always been a huge influence on me. Compositionally, the way that he writes very kind of bluesy, funky things, but they only sound simple. When you really dig into them, they're harmonically actually very complex. He makes the blues sound complex, and he makes complex sound like the blues. That's some achievement.
First one from Tito Fuentes from Spain. Do you prefer 4 strings or 5-string bass guitars? The more, the better? 5
1,
string.
2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
I gotta have that low B.
Okay.
On the new Aristocrats record, there's even a couple songs where it's low A, very low.
One question from SkippyGirl from Australia. It's actually 2 questions.
Yes.
When you played the Unstoppable Momentum Tour in Australia with Joe, did you have a favorite or standout show from that tour? And 2, when will either the Shockwave Tour or the Caballeros Tour, or both, get to Australia?
The most special show for me on the Unstoppable Momentum Tour will always be the Oakland show. It was the last show of the North America tour.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting and challenging time for me personally. And there was something that I needed to get to at the end of that tour. And so the Oakland show was the end of that tour, and it felt like a moment where I could be completely euphoric that I had made it to there. And that's the best description that I can give you for public consumption. The Oakland show will always be very special to me. For Joe Satriani, I can't really speak for them in terms of what when they're scheduling. I mean, if they always seem to make it to Australia near the end of the touring cycle. So if you do the math on the calendar, you can probably figure out when they're going to be there.
Yeah.
As far as the Aristocrats are concerned, we'd love to go to Australia if someone could just find us a promoter who's willing to bring us.
Okay.
So, people out there in the internet land, help us come to Australia. We want to go.
Get it, Skippy?
Yeah, get to work, Skippy.
One question from Sean Bodley from New Zealand. What's the only thing you learned about Joe that you didn't know before you starting playing bass for him?
I learned that he is one of the most down-to-earth, very kind of normal guy that I've ever met, who's also a world-famous guitar hero. He's just so, see, we grew up in the same part of the United States of America. He's Italian, I'm Jewish, and we grew up near New York. He grew up on Long Island. I grew up on New Jersey. Opposite sides of New York City, but kind of the same. And so when I talk to him, I feel like I'm talking to some guy that I, just went to high school with or something. Even though he's, a different age than I am, it still feels like it's a guy who's kind of from where I'm from.
Yeah.
And so when we talk, it's just very like, oh yeah, I know this guy. It's not like talking to some very important, there's no stress, there's no pretense. It's just like talking to some guy that I've known for a long time, which is very comfortable and very nice when you're working for somebody like that.
Yeah. The last question from Lisa from France. Can you say a few words in French?
Oh, I'm terrible with language. It's a horrible thing. You know, my mother's a Spanish teacher, and I never learned even to speak Spanish. And for an American, that's terrible, you know. French. Oh, my God. I don't want to say the stupid thing that everybody always says in French, which is the voulez-vous, coucher, blah, blah, blah. So I'm trying to think of something else. I mean, I know so few words, you know, bonjour, mademoiselle. It's really terrible. You know, so you're sitting here looking at a typically ignorant, uncultured American who knows very little outside of my own native language. So consider me busted.
So thank you, Bryan, for having answered my questions.
Thank you for having me.